Hi, I'm Esther.
And I'm Sean.
I write about AI news here at Tech Target.
And I edit Esther's stories.
We're here to talk to tech experts about everything AI, from open and closed models to AI agents and who's ahead in the generative AI race.
And even the elusive AGI.
We've got it covered, right, Sean?
Yep, we've got it covered.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Targeting AI podcast from Informa Tech Target. Today, we're delighted to be talking with Alan Trefler, founder and CEO of Pegasystems, a longtime vendor of business process automation and CX software. Trefler, among his many accomplishments, other than building Pegasystems from its founding in 1983 when he was 27 into a company with a market valuation of $7.6 billion and more than 5,400 employees, was a chess master in college. And I think you're celebrating your 50th anniversary of winning the World Open sometime soon. So today we're going to talk with Alan about his views on AI and how he's seen the technology evolve over the years. Welcome aboard, Alan.
Thank you, Sean. Real pleasure.
Thank you so much for being here. We feel so honored. So Pegasystems has long used AI technology in its products, but your company has adopted generative AI in recent years. And last year, you injected a substantial amount of Gen AI into the Pega Infinity platform by updating the platform with AI brand voice assistants powered by Gen AI. So how have Pega's products improved since you added Gen AI and going beyond the tradition predictive AI technology in past years?
Well, we've been doing statistical AI as a key part of our platform since 2010, when we brought on, we actually went and acquired a company that was expert in it. And I'm still a big believer in statistical AI, and it does not obviate statistical AI is not wiped out by generative AI. They're very complementary, though there's so much hype and so much confusion that people get it wrong all the time. When my head of AI, who joined us from that company that we brought on, was talking at PegaWorld in 2019, he actually put up 4 pictures of Rembrandts and said, there's this thing called generative AI coming. One of these 4 was drawn by a computer, and of course, no one could tell which one it was. And he said, look, it's going to be coming, probably about 10 years, but it's really going to change the way lots of things work. So we were kind of stunned when at the end of 2022, it was so much better, so much more advanced than one could have expected in just those 3 years, that we completely retargeted our development agenda for 2023 and 2024 to bring generative AI into the design and into the thinking and collaboration process. And that's what I think has really set our business going in the right direction.
Okay, so you have these things called AI coaches. Pega provides in all your apps. And how are they different from, let's say, co-pilots and the other Gen AI assistants on the market in major CRM and CX applications?
So the way our generative AI thinking goes actually goes back not just to coaches, which are a particular manifestation of the AI, but to something we call Blueprint, which is an agent used at design time to be able to help you really think through how you want your business to work. We're in industries where people cannot afford hallucinations at runtime. You can't just have a language model go off and do something because it reasoned that it could do it. You need to be able to operate in predictable ways, but we want to use the creativity of the LLMs to be able to build the workflows that will get to the right outcomes at scale, at scope, and with speed. And with this Blueprint capability, we've been able to do that in a way that's very empowering, very collaborative, but also very, very safe. I don't consider Copilot and the other prompt-driven ways of doing things to be sufficiently safe at runtime. Fine at design time, but not acceptable at runtime.
I wonder if you can just elaborate a little bit on that, if you don't mind, Alan, because you're talking about the difference between runtime and design time, right? Can you, can you just elaborate on what you mean, and how would you know, right? As like a as an enterprise, if I'm seeing something running, not hallucinating, or even the customer, it's like, okay, it works, but what differentiates the two, and what is the error rate, right? Because who's to say that it's not hallucinating for you at runtime, but it could hallucinate for other people at runtime, right?
So let me dig into that, because I think that's a great question. And to set it up, let's talk about the two alternatives that are out there for how to apply this in what I would describe as serious business settings. Now, we've got some vendors out there who are talking about creating a prompt, creating textual instructions that describe an objective or a purpose, and then at runtime, when you're actually talking to a customer, feeding it some data, hooking it up with that prompt, calling that an agent, and then having it do something. I consider that to be a prompt and a prayer approach to applying AI. Because what you're doing is you've got this prompt and you're kind of praying that it's going to give the right answer to the customer, run them through the right steps. And the trouble is that these language models, unbelievably powerful as they are, they tend to be a little creative. And what they tend to do is go around and go about things, not always in the same order, not always with the same outcome. And if you're serving two clients of a bank or an insurance company or whatever you're doing, and you handle them differently when you shouldn't have, even if both outcomes turn out to be all right, you've got a problem. Well, we've got the exact opposite approach. What we say is, hey, let's use all that creativity and design it into workflows. So for all the different things I might do as a particular type of company, I'm going to create the catalog of workflows, and I'm going to nail them down so that each one of them is sensible and reliable and can be looked at. And that is design time. That's when you're designing what the offerings your business has looks like. There you can use the creativity because you're curating them. You've got a human being who's looking at them. You've got experts who are saying, yeah, that's the way we want to do things, not this way we want to do things. You're recording them in workflows. And then at runtime, when a human, for example, is chatting with it, or a business user in the business is chatting with it, you do use the language model, but you don't use it for creativity. You don't use it for reasoning. You just use it for language, for semantics, for interpreting what the person is asking for and hooking it to the right workflow. That gives you complete safety and tremendous power. And candidly, this is where it plays to a strength Pega has, because for decades we've been building the state-of-the-art workflow engine. And it's that workflow engine that makes this possible, makes it possible for us to have an agent that speaks and communicates in beautiful language, but looks to a workflow to provide the guidance, the control, the guardrails, the reliability that it needs to actually execute. And that difference between just having a prompt, or I was listening to a CEO of another company talk about having thousands of prompts to run a business. Trying to run your business over those prompts, a couple of things. One, I think it'd be very hard to test. Two, you are going to get divergences that you don't want just by the nature of LLMs. And three, God forbid a new LLM is released. They're being released twice a year these days by companies. How would you ever test all those prompts? And it's very comforting to have a workflow so you can tell somebody what you're doing as you do it, not just have to rely on step-by-step reasoning. So does that make sense, Esther? Does that?
It does. And then I guess going back, it's like, how has Gen AI technology expanded the definition and benefits to enterprises of business process automation?
Yeah, so it's useful, I think, in two ways. One is there are lots of features that we've built out Gen AI agents and capabilities to handle. For example, summarize a document. Or, in the old days, you had to do optical character recognition by calling a piece of OCR software. Now, you can just feed it to a language model, and it does a beautiful job of interpreting what's in documents, et cetera. So we use it as one of dozens of features that are available to listen to the voice stream and be able to pick out what somebody is saying and what their tone is. But in addition to this feature use, we use it, I think, most importantly, for that design step I talked about, for that being able to figure out, hey, if I'm an insurance company and I'm handling policies, what are the things my customers are going to want to interact with me about? They want to want information about the policy. They want to adjust it and change it. They're going to want to perhaps, God forbid, cancel it, in which case I want to try to save them on the policy. Maybe they change the beneficiary or add another beneficiary. There's a set of workflows that are readily identifiable, that can be beautifully designed. And then the LLM is going to just connect what I want to the right workflow and prompt me to put the right information in and work with me. By doing that, we get all the power of the LLMs with none of the rest.
Alan, a quick follow-up on that. So is it correct to look at AI agents, let's say, as just the next evolution of business process automation?
So we think that workflows themselves represent the right way to instruct your agents as to what to do, to provide that level of reliability. And if you can then use the LLMs to make creating workflows easy and create new workflows even on the fly, but always do it grounded in the workflow world, you can have agents that bring business process management to a whole new level of automation, a whole new level of friendliness. But you don't have to just pray for a prompt. You can actually get the best of both worlds. That's what we think the future is. We think it's using agents to do exciting things, to be able to collaborate among themselves and be able to help execute complicated things, but to be able to do it under the control and direction of workflows.
Okay, so to get back to, mention agents again. I wanted to say one thing before I ask next question. You said earlier that Gen AI are releasing new LLMs twice a year. We feel like it's almost like twice a week sometimes.
Well,
especially OpenAI.
I think you're,
Yeah.
I think you're closer to accurate because. But how in the world? Let's say you did what one of the some of the big vendors are telling you to do, and that's true for Microsoft, for ServiceNow, for Salesforce. They're telling you to write these super complicated prompts. They have prompt studios in which you design the prompts that your LLM should use to run your business. How in the world can you test 5,000? I mean, they're actually talking about thousands of prompts that need maybe a control structure, control tower to sort of try to manage them. How would you ever test them, though, when a new LLM comes out? Because let's face it, the LLMs are very sensitive to context. So if I'm dealing with a customer and I'm trying to get it to do something according to a prompt, that LLM is also influenced by all the customer's data. So how are you going to make sure that the LLM doesn't just decide it should do something extraordinary for this customer that violates the way you treated the last customer? Those are some of the really sensitive issues that have been pointed out by companies like Gartner. The New York Times earlier this week just published an article that said LLM hallucinations are getting worse for reasons that the writers of the LLMs can't explain. They're actually becoming more unpredictable. I want to use those for what they're great and predictable at, which is language, which is finding the right workflow, and then use the workflow to be able to make sure that we're executing things in a reliable and customer friendly and ethical way.
Okay, thanks. So we have to talk about AI agents now, which is like, it seems like agentic AI just came onto the scene 2.5 years ago, and then almost immediately, quickly morphed into agentic AI. Everything's agentic AI. So to what extent is AI agents overhyped or real? And also, are these new technologies yet at a state of maturity at which enterprises can realize real ROI and better automation, or are we still in the testing and proof of concept phase? Esther was just at an AI
I,
conference in New York, and the enterprises she talked to said, "Hey, they're not that mature yet."
I think they're not that mature, but a lot of it depends on what you use them for. Once again, if you use it, for example, in collaboration with an expert, if you were brainstorming a new podcast you wanted to create, you could work with an AI agent and brainstorm with it because you're in there making sure that what the ultimate outcome is something that's going to be consistent with your standards and your objectives. But if you're just going to set it loose, um, it's got to be at a level of reliability that they're just not at right now. And to be honest, I think it's going to take quite a while, if ever, for them to get to that level of reliability.
Before I move on to the next question, I kind of want to go back to what you were saying about LLMs and their creativity, as well as perhaps not relying so much on the LLM, but basically using it as a tool for the workflow that you want to produce. Is that correct?
Yeah, what I'm actually saying is use the LLM in advance of the moment of truth with the customer. Have the LLM do its creativity, do its reasoning, operate and work with you to lay out the workflows that you as a business want to do with a customer. Look, businesses do and want to do the same things with their customers. There needs to be a catalog of what are the services this business offers to its customers. And every one of the elements of that service catalog can be collaboratively and brilliantly designed. Just don't do it while the customer's on the phone. Have it laid out in advance and then just pick the right one depending on what the conversation with the customer says. That gives you the best of both worlds. But the problem my competitors have is you need a workflow engine to be able to do that, because that's what's going to run the workflows. We just happened to come to this party with a state-of-the-art workflow engine. So what we did over 2023 and 2024 is we ground the workflow engine into the LLM, as it were. So you get the benefit of, it is a miracle how it can speak in multiple languages and interoperate and understand different things. You get the wonderful power of the LLM to understand the large language model that it was based on, but you've preordained what the workflows are so you can do them reliably.
In that sense, I wonder if you believe that that is the role of vendors like yours in the state of Gen AI, of providing that engine, because we have obviously like the OpenAI who are and the Co-Air who are, the foundation model providers. They provide the LLMs, and then we have the Google and the Microsoft hyperscalers. Do you feel like perhaps your role is kind of to fill in that gap of providing that workflow engine?
Yeah, I think that's exactly what our role is. Our role is to make it so that we can take what OpenAI does and does brilliantly, or what Vertex does and it does brilliantly, and we can make it reliable by finding the right time to use that inspiration for the right purposes, to use it at design time, to define and specify the workflows, and then use it at runtime when you're interacting with it for an end customer in a much more limited way, just using the things that it doesn't hallucinate on, because I can depend on the workflows to actually execute the things that I needed to execute on without having to wonder what the boundaries are, without having to wonder how big a credit it should give, without having to wonder, is this legal in this state? All of those should be workflow defined. We shouldn't be winging them. But we can use the LLM to define all of those workflow variations and have them just sitting there to really make the interaction, the conversational interaction, very, very efficient.
Going back to the changes in AI over the decades, how surprised were you by the explosion of Gen AI technology? Obviously, you've been in technology for such a long time. So after OpenAI released ChatGPT back in November 2022, what extent was your view? To what extent was your view of this technology we've got to get into our hands, as opposed to let's wait and see?
No, we went all in right away. And the reason we did is we could see that used in conjunction with a workflow engine, it would do things that candidly are almost miraculous, because it really, we've been trying for years to make our workflows faster to design, easier to build, reduce training, and we've been making some progress over the years. But with the power of the language model at design time, we're able to actually have people talk to the language model about what they want, and then have the language model design and build those workflows. So it's easy to get all the different variations you need, and you don't have to go through the same types of training and other regimes, because the business person's able to communicate what their objectives are in a very nice natural language way. And also in multiple languages, which, given that we work with clients who operate in multiple languages, is just a tremendous added bonus. So we saw immediately that this was going to be able to be game changing for us. And I'll tell you, um, it has really changed the way that we engage with our customers.
Okay, so Alan, you have this Gen AI tool, Knowledge Buddy, in your Pega Infinity portfolio. So how does that work?
Yes.
And is it based on a specific LLM, or are you guys LLM agnostic?
So we use a variety of LLMs and try to pick what's best for the right setting. So, for example, what Knowledge Buddy does is it lets a customer create a corpus of knowledge of different facts and circumstances, maybe legislation, maybe things about its customer types and competitor types. We'll go out and we'll read their website, and so we'll get information about the customer. We use language model technology to put that into what's called a vector database. And what that means is we prepare it in advance to be able to organize it so it's well situated to answer lots of different questions. Then when a question comes into the Knowledge Buddy, or when the Knowledge Buddy observes something and wants to be able to describe what's going on, that Knowledge Buddy goes to that vector database to find what's in that database that is similar to what it sees or what it's been asked. It then uses a language model to form an answer to be able to handle it. We routinely use language models, LLMs, from OpenAI, from Amazon, what's called Bedrock, which primarily uses some models from Anthropic in our case, and also Google Vertex. And we find all three of those are really extraordinary if you use them the right way.
Can you speak a little bit about the benefits and drawbacks of customizing foundation models from other vendors versus developing the technology in-house?
Yeah, we're not a fan of customizing the foundational models, because what that means is you're not going to be able to adopt the new ones as rapidly, because you're going to have to be able to retrain the model. So what we tend to use is this approach called RAG, retrieval augmented generation, where when we go to the foundational models, we will bring context using language model technology, but we'll bring it right then and there, right at that moment, so that we're really telling the model, hey, we want you to make a decision about what to say in this situation. But here are a dozen additional facts that are going to be really pertinent to how you choose to articulate it. And so by using that combination, we can get the best of the foundational models, while at the same time using the very, very specific sorts of things you otherwise would have had to train a model to do. And we've experimented with a whole variety of approaches. We found this one to be the best.
Okay, so thanks for that. So inevitably, you touched on this earlier, but inevitably the discussion about Gen AI and agents turns to reliability, safety, and responsibility. So you said that hallucinations could be even increasing now, but how well do you think Gen AI providers have done? How good a job have they done in making the technology safe, responsible, and reliable? And how does Pegasystems deal with those issues?
Well, I think that there are big gaps. And what we've done in terms of dealing with this is choose our approach to appreciate, hey, there are gaps. The gaps are likely to persist for a very long time. I mean, one of the biggest issues, I think, is that the models really don't tell you how they came to a decision about what to say. And I think that really limits the types of things it's safe to use them for. But if I use them at design time, if I use them when I'm planning the workflows, I'm collaborating. I'm actually doing sort of a joint creative exercise between people who are experts and the model. And so I can use them much more aggressively there without having to worry about them, because the outcomes are not just going to run. The outcomes are going to be stored up in this RAG type concept so that they can be used subsequently, but in the right setting. So I think that what vendors have to do, and what end companies who want to use this stuff have to do, is really appreciate the limitations, appreciate the strengths, and find ways to play to the strengths without falling into the gaps that you could easily fall into.
I find that interesting because one of the issues you're kind of pointing at is that issue of like the black box and AI. And I've only been in this like beat for like a short time, but even before the hype of Gen AI, we've always talked about the black box. And now we're back in Gen AI and we're still talking about the black box. Can this black box ever go away? you know?
Well, we as I said earlier, are great believers not just in generative AI, but in statistical AI. And statistical AI has the ability to bring visibility and transparency to the black box. So, we operate in regulated industries. And if I use generative AI to decide how much credit to give somebody, it would be really easy to violate the law. So it would be, I think, foolish to use generative AI. And there are some types of statistical AI where you don't keep track of how you're making decisions, where it also would be a mistake. But the way we do statistical AI is we create models, and those models are transparent. And so our statistical AI can actually follow the law and make sure that it's not accidentally doing two customers differently when they really should be done the same way, which is another serious problem. So I think there are some uses where you can really open that black box. You really have an open box approach. And that really is our philosophy, to do this so that the magic, and the mysticism are not what's running here. But I'll tell you, a lot of people are just embracing, the mystical, write a prompt and wait, the magic was going to happen. Boy, I don't think that's a prudent thing for many business settings.
Another thing that I kind of noticed is you are kind of taking a collaboration approach, right? Where we're not necessarily relying on the LLM to be, like you mentioned, that magical thing to produce the next thing. But you're saying, okay, let's use it as kind of like the foundation layer and then use it and work together with what we want to produce. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's absolutely correct. And what we're able to do because of that approach is we can have the LLM, we can have the AI challenge you to think differently. So, for example, if you wanted to, design the workflows to onboard a customer, you could put in some information about what type of customers you have, how you want to onboard them, what are the types of things you need to check to make sure that you know your customer like you're supposed to. We're going to want all of those to be controlled by workflows. But the LLM, when it's helping me build those workflows, can challenge me to think differently about what I'm telling it. Can say that, for example, I looked out on the internet, and here are some other checks you may want to do about a customer to make sure they're who they say they are. And bring it back, not do them automatically, but bring it back and challenge me to make my workflow better. That's exactly what this blueprint technology does.
Okay, so I'm going to give my chess question a shot here, but I want to just preface it by, if you can permit me to say, traditional predictive AI. I understand statistical AI to be predictive AI. So to me, that seems a lot like
Yep.
chess. That's like chess. The AI figures out the permutations, the countless permutations, predicts what the outcomes of each move will be, just like an accomplished human chess player like you. But with generative AI, it seems to me like the AI can consider even more moves than predictive or statistical and faster, but fairly often will produce the wrong answer. Is that does that so?
Well, it's kind of funny.
Yeah, what analogies can you draw between chess and AI? Yeah,
Well, it's funny because if you was of OpenAI and you said you wanted to play a game of chess, which you can, it will just make up moves. It will move pieces in ways that are not legal. And sometimes it will do things that you would go, well, it's not just that doesn't make sense. That's not the way a knight moves. Knight moves like, two steps and then one to the right. It will sometimes move a knight the way a bishop moves because it is generating, another position. And they've put some checks in that to try to prevent it, but it's all very artificial and forced. You're absolutely correct that more of a statistical or predictive approach to AI is the way that these incredibly powerful chess programs work. And they also use the fact that computing power has increased so much that it's kind of sad now. Any human grandmaster can be beaten by a piece of software running on their phone. So, but it's not generative. It's really going through the patterns of the moves and trying to figure out what the best move is for any position by reliable ways, not just moving pieces at random.
so Gen AI would probably be a worse chess player than statistical AI.
I know of no generative AI program that is one of the top chess programs. All the top chess programs are very deterministic. They won't make illegal moves.
Got it.
Nice. We're wrapping up, but I have two questions. One of it is I love the fact that you're not just only into Gen AI, but you're looking at statistic predictive AI. So looking at both of those, in what way do you see the technology weaving together and integrating as we move forward?
Yeah, so there are business problems from which you want to train the AI to find patterns in your specific data. And those are the ones for which statistical AI is incredibly powerful and should be used. There are other situations in which you might want to summarize a document or generate a letter or even design a workflow that you check with somebody where there's an element of creativity and personalization that you want to really be language oriented. Those are the situations with generative AI is a tremendous compliment. And you're absolutely right. Our platform knows how to do both and do the right one at the right time.
Moving forward and looking ahead, what's Pegasystems' AI roadmap for the next 5 years, and how do you expect Gen AI to evolve, including your thoughts on AGI?
Well, the whole idea of artificial general intelligence that's just going to do everything, that I could write a prompt that said, "Hey, treat my customers right," and suddenly all customer service is automated and happens. I think we're really quite some distance from that for a whole lot of reasons. However, AI is central to our roadmap, and we're using it to help people do a better job of designing and a better job of executing. And one thing in particular that we're rolling out right now is the ability to use AI for legacy transformation. So the ability for a client of ours to be able to take information about one of their old systems. It's not uncommon for an organization to have 3, 4, 5,000 legacy systems that they want to get rid of, some of which have been around forever, and some of which are just not very good or have security vulnerabilities. We let you take your user manual. We let you record a 20-minute video and annotate it of somebody using that system. We let you take all these distinct and discrete sources in, put as much as you have in to the blueprint that we talked about, and generative AI then will grind through it, use our knowledge of the way that systems and workflows work, and create a legacy replacement. And I think this is game changing in terms of really making it possible for our customers to modernize their estate and to do it in a way that you wouldn't have thought possible 3-4 years ago.
Well, thank you so much, Alan, for being on today's podcast. We really appreciate you. And thank to our audience, our listeners, our viewers. Please feel free to reach out with Alan. You're on LinkedIn, right?
I am.
Okay, check them out on LinkedIn, as well as go over to Pegasystems in case you have any needs. Please check out our articles about Pegasystems on Informer Tech Target's website, and please feel free to share, download, comment, and give a review for this podcast. And we will see you next time on the Targeting AI podcast.
To hear the full audio podcast, please go to Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon, Audible, TuneIn, Podbean, and other popular podcast platforms.